time for another review. Today we're going to be looking at Revel Germany's 1/48 scale F-104G Starfighter. Now this is one, excuse me, of their older boxings. And so one thing I do not like about these older boxings is how this flip opening type of box instead of the more common nowadays traditional sort of flap or whole top coming off style. So let's get into it. So first up we have our two main fuselage halves. Detail is there, however it's on the shallow side. I'd say this would be a very great prime example of kit that deserves a once over with a scribing tool just to deepen up the panel lines a little. Aside from that, details fairly good. Again, recessed details, a lot of little rivet marks all over. Detail in the speed brake area is a little lacking, but passable. Similarly, here in the cockpit area, you basically get almost no detail. Here we have the other half, again, similar part breakdown. Inlet area is fairly nicely detailed. And when two together, you do get a pretty decent size of idea of how sort of narrow and long this thing is, which is interesting to see. Continuing on, we've got some of the wing parts. A little surprised with how the wing breakdown went in with this kit, as I've been more used to Revell's kits not being as detailed as, say, some of Hasegawa's offerings. But in this kit, it actually has breakdown of the flaps, ailerons, and slats, which I found very nice. Here we have a couple panel parts, as well as gear bay doors, which are nicely detailed. I don't have any real complaints about those. Here we have some of the additional parts that go into the wings, the upper halves specifically, slats, flaps, and so forth. Do like the fact that they did give you the parts separate, as that does offer a decent number of possibilities as far as build up. Do have one big piece for the tail section, which is, I'd have to say, one of the thinnest wing sections I've ever seen. I mean, it's close to being almost paper thin, which is true for the aircraft, as everything on that aircraft is thin, allow it to go very fast. Landing gear do look a little on the hefty side. Again, I'll have to double check references, but they just seem a little on the thick side to my eye. This could obviously be wrong, but again, just to my eye, it seems a little overscale. Detail here on the main instrument panel is also shallower, as we saw on the main fuselage parts. You do, however, get all the dials and such molded in, which is nice and will allow you to detail it up, but as I said, detail is shallow, and it definitely could have been crisper and deeper. It'll be more appropriate. Inlet, jet inlet's very nicely done. I'm very happy with that, as well as the fact that we get the burner parts as separate pieces. You don't see that as often. Typically you'll have to get photo etch parts to do that. So the fact they included this right out the bat makes me happy, as it gives you a little extra detail you don't normally see. Moving on, we get some other odds and end parts, as well as parts for the seat, wheels. Interesting to note, they did the wheels as totally separate individual parts, which will definitely ease in the painting process. Again, something you don't usually see, and be nice if more companies did that, as that would definitely make it easier to paint up your wheels without having to deal with masking. Excuse me. Next up, we've got the main cockpit tub. Detail is definitely passable for out of the box kit. No real complaints. Much like the other parts, the detail is a little on the shallow side and could be better, but in comparison to the earlier parts, is I would say superior. Here we've got parts for the main gear bay, which is fairly nicely done, as well as a couple other bulkheads and one option for the burner can. Again, this is part of the reason why I don't care for this particular type of boxing, is it does make it a little more difficult to get the parts out so I can discuss them with you guys. Next we have our nose gear bay, which is fairly undetailed but still somewhat passable. Obviously, since it's going to be difficult to do much in there as far as extra detailing or scratch building, sorry. But again, you just have to work with it. Some of the other details is fairly nicely done. Again, second option for burner can. Here we have all the parts for the wingtip drop tanks, which nice inclusion. Grab the part that fell. More parts for the ejection seat. Now, one thing to note, this has got to be one of the most complicated build and ejection seats I have ever seen. I mean, there's at least in the instruction sheet, which I'll get to in a little bit, 7 or 8 steps to building it. Which, now on one hand, does let you get more detail in, but at the same time makes it a bit of a pain. Now, on this spur, we have the last set of detail parts for various odds and ends, as well as our other wheel. Now, a very interesting thing about this particular boxing is the fact that you get this, a set of polycaps for the horizontal stabs. And I found this interesting, as I've never seen these included before in a kit. Again, I mean, it makes sense to me, as it does make it easier to attach, but never seen those. Now, moving on to our clear parts. As far as the canopy parts go, they're nicely done. No seam line down the middle, no need for cleanup other than removing from the part tree. They're good to go. A couple of the smaller parts here do have a little bit of flashing, but it's fairly minimal, so not much to worry about there. Now, moving on to our decal sheet. You get a fairly extensive decal sheet with this kit, including potential options to use decals for the instrument panels, though I wouldn't recommend them. But otherwise, you get a lot of markings for this particular kit, as well as all the stenciling you need. Nice high-vis scheme as seen on the box art. Very nicely done, though, given particular boxing, the age of the decals, I'm a little suspect as to how good they may still be, but again, something you always look out for in older boxings. Now, the instruction sheet for this kit is fairly lengthy, and much like the Italeri kit I did a couple of reviews back, they have the paint markings done by letter and included here in the front, so that does take getting used to. Much as I said a little bit ago, very complicated ejection seat assembly. While this does give you more detail, it does make it a little harder to build. Now, here we have where you gotta include the various polycaps, and I actually take that back. They're not used for the horizontal stabs. They're actually for attaching the engine and a couple other components. I apologize about that. But yeah, otherwise, it's a fairly complicated build, actually. So it's something to be aware of. Again, here we see the wing assembly instructions, which is very nice to include the various option parts, detailed landing gear, and obviously moving on to various odds and end parts. Now here we have our various marking schemes, so be careful when building it. And one thing to note I find interesting, here in the instruction sheet has the box art aircraft without the drop tanks, yet on the box it has them. So you may need to check references on that particular one. But you get a total of 4 different options as far as aircraft you can build. So fairly standard in that regard. So overall, it's a fairly decent kit. It's definitely has its pros and its overall I would say this is a good middle of the road type kit. It's got fairly decent amount of extra detailing to satisfy those at the higher end of the skill spectrum. At the same time, it's not so overly complicated that someone with less experience couldn't possibly build it. So, oh yeah, it's a mixed bag, in essence. Definitely, if you find it, it's one you might consider picking up, but at the same time, not one you have to have. But yeah, so that was Revel Germany's 148th F-104G Starfighter kit. Till next time.